Welcome to another edition of Geopolitics and Empire. Joining us for the first time on the podcast is John Sneisen of economictruth.org and OuterrNet. The links are in the description, but that would be OuterrNet. Welcome, John.
Thank you. My pleasure. It's great to be on your Geopolitics podcast. It's the first time, I believe. So
yeah, we were about confused because I had you on my TNT show, then you had me on your podcast,
the OuterrNet,
channel, and then now it's your first time on the podcast. And you've been involved in alt media for the longest time. I've seen you do work with others. I think it was Josh Sigurdson, World Alternative Media. I've seen you with Griffin. And so, if you want to, before getting into some of the topics, anything you want to tell us about yourself, your work?
Yeah, for sure. Like I kind of got involved in it's everything really started in 2013 when I ended up going to the thing where it was the initial creation of something called Freedom Force International, and it happened in Paso Robles, California. And it was I randomly was searching up stuff. I was starting to get into like in 2012. I really launched my investigative journalism stuff into financial, into the monetary system, finance, and so on. And I was looking for some other people that was doing similar things, and Freedom Force popped up. And it was Griffin's group that he created, Freedom Force International. And I managed to sneak myself onto the board by being elected to it. At the time. So I was sitting at the board of Freedom Force International with Griffin. So it's been a tremendous pleasure to work with him. And he also pushed me to be like, John, you got to go and do something. And so I did. And I managed to find a guy locally here in Winnipeg, Manitoba, where I currently live with my wife. And the guy's name, he was Josh Sigurdson. Probably you guys know him. He ran at the time something called Winnipeg Alternative Media. And that was, I think, 2016 when I met him at a protest against Monsanto at the time. So we got hit it off right away, and we started doing podcasts together, and we created World Alternative Media, which got quite big, all the way up to almost 150, 200,000 subscribers on YouTube. So it was very successful. And then they said goodbye to us in 2018. And then after that, I joined forces with, so I did a little bit of stuff still with him, but then I joined forces with a financial advisor called Timothy Picciott, the Liberty Advisor, and we actually did the Tim and John show for a year and a half, and really did deep diving into the monetary system, economics, and all that stuff. And we started actually right as SHTF in 2019, and we were starting to cover the repo market was blowing up and all that stuff. And then suddenly we were in a full-fledged crisis, but that was happening before this supposed thing that came, the virus came out. So very interesting stuff. So we did that. And then currently I'm, doing my the Economic Truth report with the economictruth.org, which is my website. And then I have been looking for solutions to our problems, and it'd be about time not to just talk about it. So I was like, let's figure out something. And I found a guy, actually he found me. He connected with me, a libertarian from the UK called James Cunnington. And he actually invited me to take a look at something that him and another web developer, he was a web developer and also owned a website promoting gold and silver storage for wealthy individuals in the UK. And so I met with him, but he had a buddy of his that is developing something cool. It's like, oh, this is some, it sounds like you're interested in it. So it was some peer-to-peer communication that they were working on. And here I am with OuterrNet. So yeah, it's been quite the ride and exciting. And I still do, of course, my Economic Truth report, but my main focus the last year or so has really been hardcore on the focus of solution with the OuterrNet project. But yeah, it's very exciting. So much stuff happening. So we got lots to talk about, I'm sure.
Yeah, let's get into OuterrNet. But before looking at that solution from your view, how would you explain the problem? Basically, if I'll just, my view is, we're headed into dystopia. I had my recent guest, Luka Golish-Babic, out in Croatia with a political party there. He just founded, like, I forget the full name, anti-technocracy, council. They're bringing in the chat control, which is like, it's like Soviet, it's Stasi or Gestapo, total surveillance of all communications, the Digital Services Act, the Democracy Shield, the Ministry of Truth. I mean, all this, Google is batting down the hatches. Soon they're not going to allow like side loading and like all this insanity. How would you sort of explain the problem?
Yeah, so the problem is a massive, massive, massive overreach of our privacy. There's zero private. If we're on the internet, now we're on Zoom, everything that we record and talk about here is actually being sent to probably the NSA or somebody that have that stored somewhere, so they can make sure that what Roe and John is talking about, what are those dirty peasants up to? Trying to conspire to create a more free world kind of thing. So the big problem is, the surveillance they call capitalism has nothing to do with capitalism really, but it's the surveillance grid that these big platform corporations like Google, Facebook, YouTube, now OpenAI, of course, have become a huge control grid as well that's developed. So all these big platform companies, and even X, I would throw into there as well, have become like data mining sources where all our data is being stolen basically, and then used for, to sell to other companies, and then also, of course, being, given to any surveillance agency in our whatever your potato like alphabet soup is called in your home country. And so that everything that we do and talk about or chat or any data that we send online is not ours. So basically, we live in a place where everything that we think that we do or own with our digital lives is controlled or owned by others. We were at the place, where they talk about, nothing and be happy like that. Yeah, we were there actually with our digital lives. Not so much yet with the private lives for most of us, but it's getting there too. But with the digital lives, we basically own nothing now. Like, look at, for example, the video streamers that's out there. Like, you don't own any of that. Like Spotify, you don't own any of that. You could buy it, but then what if Spotify disappears, or if they get rid of a music, or what if Amazon Books got rid of a book that they don't like? And so we have these massive monstrosities, entities that are the platforms that we live on basically to have our digital lives and communicate with others, and they don't have the best interest for us. They treat us like sheep on a farm and then sell everything that they can about us to the data industry. Like big data is a massive industry, and so we have zero freedom, zero privacy, and that I think that's kind of the gist of the problem. Is like we have no freedom. Well, we can say what we want, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we were allowed to say it will be taken down. That have happened to me, and sure that has happened to you many times. I remember how many times I was in the Facebook gulag until I gave up and just left the platform in total. And now they're trying to like soften it up a bit, like letting you back in. Actually, the World Alternative Media channel was reinstated after 8 years. Yeah. Which was like suddenly it's just there, which was hilariously interesting. After, of course, they completely destroyed the momentum at the time. And so I think the problem is that we've gotten so used to and accustomed to now that we're just kind of almost like giving up on having freedom, and like we're being like kind of corralled into this digital gulag that they created for us. And so that is the problem that we're facing, and it's just like the noose is getting tighter and tighter on the gulag, and you see in all this digital ID stuff that is coming in. It's not so much with the government directly doing it, but it's indirectly through that. Oh, we're gonna have to digitally identify you as above 16 years old. It's it's kind of soft ways of saying that you need a digital ID to be able to even access the internet. And so that's where we're heading towards, where we basically live in a gulag that is fully controlled by these entities, either corporate or government structures that have none of our best interest in play, and they just want to make sure that we're not able to rebel or live our own life and can have freedom and control of our own data and thought and behavior. And so they're trying to mold us while we're trying to break out of the mold, kind of thing. And that's I think that's the big fight that's going on here, that I'm trying to kind of like head on change quite drastically, I would say.
Yeah, and just a few recent examples I had. I tried to make an Amazon purchase. They immediately canceled my order. It was disappeared, and my account was suspended. There's the in Latin America here, there's the Mercado Libre, which is like the eBay or Amazon of Latin America. I couldn't advance with the account because they want to scan my face. I'm like you don't even have that. You don't even have that with Amazon. And then Ciberpuerta, which is like the top tech website online store here in Mexico. Twice they've screwed me over. And then I think in general, the idea is to move away from these big guys. I got to buy, I'm going to go to a local computer store to buy something. So you're supporting the local economy, not supporting the big guys. It costs more money. But like you said with Amazon, for thought crime or whatever, it's I think it was actually like a technocratic glitch, like in the movie I use as a reference, the 1985 film Brazil, where it's like it wasn't even thought crime. It's just the system, the AI doesn't work. False positives, it counts as fraud, what's not fraud, and then you're locked out of the system. I actually went online, and it's happening right now. The last few months, people all over the U.S. are having the same issue. And people who just make normal purchases are getting their purchases canceled and accounts suspended. And then they're stuck in that loop and they can't get out of it because they call the customer service. It doesn't exist. It's outsourced. They don't have the power to solve the problem. And then they've been locked out of Amazon for no actual good reason. And so about the OuterrNet then, I'm still not clear what it is exactly, so I'm going to have you explain it. But I've been trying to move towards what I think you're doing is, you mentioned Spotify, you can have your account canceled, you lose access, they take down, Amazon. We've seen that with Netflix, Amazon Prime, movies come and go. Video games on many platforms, you bought it and they pulled it, and so now you don't have it anymore. And I've seen these things called like NAS or NAS, where so you got to invest. It costs money to do what OuterrNet I think wants to do, but we should do it anyways. Where you set up a system like a home computer with drives, and you store all of your stuff there. So explain to us what exactly is the OuterrNet.
Yeah, no, exactly. The OuterrNet is a whole new communication protocol. And so how we usually communicate with our systems is we have an internet service provider, which we are hooked up to through either a copper or fiber cable that goes to a CO unit, a central place that has like your little modem card in it. And then it goes the data from there to a central server somewhere. And then it goes basically through to whoever next you need to pick the data from, and then so on. And most likely, it usually also goes through a data center called the NSA's data center or other data centers to communicate. Now, what we are changing is that we are creating a self-hosted version of the internet instead. So our big grand goal is to create these computers that are talking to each other without even using internet service providers. That's our big grand goal down the line. But now we're building it in the internet itself, but we're actually making it so I could communicate. I could open a web browser and then put in an address, and then that address will send me to my home computer. And then that home computer, I click on create a video call. I share that link with you, just like you shared a Zoom link with me. And then we both open that on both of our web browsers. Doesn't matter if you're on a phone, whatever web browser you're on, and you open that, and then suddenly we have a direct connection with video, just like we have now on Zoom. And so the cool portion about that is that signal goes to my computer, like to this what's called a relay or a hypernode, we like to call it, which is my home computer. So that works like the router in the system. So like your home network router that you have from your internet service provider or something. Instead of that, like this is sending data now and communicating through the internet itself. So it's like kind of skipping all the other internet service stuff out there. It's just sending direct link with using that box, and then communicating with us through like our web browsers.
Can we just? I'm still confused there.
No.
So as you explained, okay, my computer now is connected by Ethernet to my ISP's modem, and then that modem fiber optics goes to the ISP headquarters, and then from there they're connected. The cables go throughout Mexico, and then they connect to the US, and then there's the sub-sea cable from the US that goes to Europe. And that's how, or in this case, Canada. So we are right now, if I understand it correctly, connected by a wire, you in Canada and me in Mexico, through our different respective ISPs. For the OuterrNet, I'm still trying to understand. Okay, let's say I get the tech. I have the OuterrNet tech here. You've got it there. I mean, don't we still have to send the signal through the ISP, but maybe you evade some stuff? Or how do we technically connect?
Yeah, so currently we are building it on the internet, because like just building a whole new system is kind of like, a lot of people have tried to do that many times and they kind of fail because they just get stuck in trying to build it. But how about we build it within the system to then build it outside of the system, kind of thing. So we're still using the internet service provider at my house, but what ends up happening is instead of it going through all those loops, now it just talks to a link that is hosted somewhere, and then it sends a signal. So how it would work is like I open the website, so I have my browser, it goes through my network onto my computer, then you open that link, it goes all through the infrastructure that we talked about, but it goes directly to this little router thingy instead of going through all the routers.
So can we say, in a way, for people to understand, it's kind of like a VPN service in a sense,
bit like it,
like that mechanism. So I right now, I usually use a VPN, so I'll connect to my ISP. But then when I turn on the VPN, I'm using the ISP's internet, but I'm going through the VPN, so ISP can't see what I'm doing. Would that kind of be a similar principle to OuterrNet?
No, 100%. Yeah, 100%. Like very similar to that, of course. But what is cool about it is that we have built like app-like structures within the system that is hosted on this little mini computer. And so, like when you click on a link to open a video call, that's actually a little mini app that's built on there that actually opens up a window, and then is like, oh, I gotta communicate. So it sends a signal to this little router thing, and then you open it up. Both of us sends a signal. It's like, hey, we're here in this little web address, and then suddenly it sees it, and then my little router thingy, instead of all the routers everywhere, just talks and be like, oh, we got to make a direct connection between these two guys. They want to connect, and then suddenly through our web browsers, now we're directly connected without the need for any servers anywhere or anything. So it's what it does, it creates like a tunnel almost, like through the system. Like we're digging like secret tunnels through the control grid that's out there that they can't really like stop. And they're using a different routing mechanism. So that's the protocol itself, is like the way it communicates is different from our current system that needs to talk through a whole bunch of servers and data centers. Like we are just like finding the straight way, and then our browsers will connect, and then we have a direct connection instead of a connection through all these data centers everywhere that, now this Zoom call is getting stored somewhere or is being processed somewhere in a server in a data rack somewhere in the data center. Instead, if we used our system, it would just be like directly connected, and the browser would actually run it. So the reason why we chose the actual web browser instead of creating an app, that's where most people also have failed, is they create an app on either Apple or Google. Well, now you have an app in the App Store. And so now you're completely under the control of that. Now, the reason why we chose a web browser, still a little bit controllable, but with web browsers, you could actually build replica web browsers yourself that could be, let's say, run on a Linux type system. And then you would be able to circumvent it that way. But we are using all kinds of browsers, are able to just use that link and make a connection directly. And so we kind of like try to circumvent, try to find as many points that they could stop us and then make it to as minimal points of basically making it as many points, I guess, as possible to, that would be way harder to stop us than it would be if we just went the route of the regular technical web development today.
Yeah, you mentioned Zoom, and anyways, my Zoom calls with guests, they're public. It's a public podcast, so in this particular use, it's irrelevant. But as you said so effectively with this new system, the data would just be, you would have the data and I would have the data, and no
and
third
it's stored
parties.
in our web browser, which is kind of it blows my mind. I'm not a technical guy, and I'm trying to explain these technical things, but it's actually stored in the web browser, has like a database in it that is stored locally on your computer, and that's where all of that data and communication that would happen between us on the OuterrNet protocol system would happen and sit in that database that is then stored on the on your local computer. Because you could talk through and have one of these at home, but you could also talk through mine and communicate through my mine that is stored at my place if you want to. So you don't need to own like this mini computer. You could actually use the system even though it's not yours, but you set up the connections and then you connect the same way anywhere in the world. So like what it does, it just facilitates the connection. And then we're stuck in this secret tunnel on the internet that we can communicate directly with each other, which is super cool. Like I'm very excited about it. It's but I think what we're trying to do with OuterrNet on top of that is basically we're trying to create a cloud computing network. It sounds like scary, but what it does, it actually allows everybody to, if you want to, you could be offline. You don't have to join the network, but you could be a part of the network, which is kind of like, it's not a blockchain. That's the difference with this. But it's a network of all these computers that could work together to process things if you want to. So you could actually, we're building a network where it could be totally offline, have everything offline. You could even create your little AI stuff online, like have all these apps and everything on your computer privately at your house without any internet service provider needed, which is very cool because most apps and everything on your computer today try to pull the plug, like your ISP, and have your internet no internet service and try to access anything. Like it's almost like a lot of it is quite impossible actually today. So it allows both for complete off-grid control of whatever, like if you had like programs that was developed on this, which we have, and you could just use them directly at home, or you could choose to be a part of the greater network and then provide services to it, either by having a computer that could process different data. Like you could have an AI run on this network that'd be potentially way greater than any data center that Elon Musk could put up, for example. So it's a super cool structure. And what's even cooler about this is as we deploy this into society, potentially you could force Amazon or Microsoft or any of these big guys to be forced to join the network but have full privacy. They can't control the data whatsoever. And so that's kind of the big thing here. The data is being transacted with privacy attached to it, and nobody owns the data. I think that's the two biggest ones, and then the direct peer-to-peer connection that happens when we communicate and set up communication instead of all this control grid. What we found is that a lot of times our actual video, when we do use this, is like incredibly crisp and nice because there's no tracking on it, and there's no data brokers that are stealing all the data and selling it anywhere, and there's no ad tracking or any of that stuff, which is quite remarkable in this world today. There's probably a few out there trying to do similar things, but we're just trying to help us escape from this digital gulag by creating technology. Like, we're not trying to go completely off technology. A lot of people are trying to do that because there's no other option. But we are trying to create. We live in a technological world. Why not create a solution where we could sidestep it completely and say goodbye to the old control grid and maybe we could create a new world where we are fully decentralized, and we could create amazing small societies anywhere in the world without the need for this technocratic control grid that's being built for us.
Just real quick on the tech. So most people have in their homes a desktop computer or a laptop computer and a router or modem. They might have a landline, ISP, or they might have a Starlink satellite, or they might have a cell phone service that uses their hotspot. I just got one of these Byte. I tested it out. It's really slow, but still works for simple browsing, using the 4G, I guess, network. So my question is, and I know, and that's the second question, I know older folks who don't have laptops or desktops, they just have smartphones. So, and they don't even have modems or routers. So they just have a smartphone and they use the internet on the 4 or 5G on their phone. What tech? So this is what most of us have. What would we need to then use the OuterrNet?
This thing, you could use both. So like it's same principle on your iPhone or on your the Google Android, or if it's Google or if it's Samsung. It basically stores it in the web browser the same way in that little database thing, because all web browsers are very similar in the way they're built. And so now, like, all that data and everything, and the cool thing is there's a unique cryptological key in there that uniquely identify you as a unit, and you can't copy that. Well, there's no need for passwords or any of this, like two-phase authentication. How many times have people struggled going through all this verification of your identity? Well, now we have a complete anonymous, fully certified identity that you created cryptologically, that sits in the browser. And when you use that browser to connect to any of these like little apps in the network, they know that is you, but they have no clue who you are.
So what you're saying then, you don't need any extra devices. You can use it already through a smartphone, laptop, desktop.
Phone, laptop, desktop. Doesn't matter. It's agnostic as long as you have a browser on.
But then if you want to go further, then you can build a beefier, let's say, home setup to host more.
100%. Yeah, you could build like a super fancy computer standalone at home that could be a part of the network, or you could just use it locally at yourself and have all these kind of things, like all types of apps that you wanted to develop. Like, we have a guy right now, he's developing these decentralized apps on the network, and he's using AI to create it and then mold it into a OuterrNet hub reliable app, so it actually uses our network instead of like using the regular structure. So it's very cool. I open like many apps on my web browser, and what they have is like, I just go to a website that kind of looks like a website, and then I click on it, and it's a zip file, for example. Now, what is cool about this is you could actually build websites on this, and this is common in the future, but you could, instead of you having to go to HTTP or whatever in the future to find a website, well, now you could send a file that we also have a file sharing app, so you could send it over this private peer-to-peer app, a zip file, It's like, this is my business. Here's my website. And we have a fully functional website that's on a zip file that you open on your local computer. And now so it totally changes everything. Like, it's not stationary anymore. Your business, like, it could be sent around to hundreds of people with a little file instead, which is kind of super cool and revolutionary, because now you're not stuck to, like, let's say I use a GoDaddy for my website currently, but we could stick it on this little file, and then I could just send it. I was like, oh, here's my website. Take a look at it. So you could build it within the system and then send it to each other instead of having been forced to have it on a place. People have been censored that way, by being held hostage on a platform. Like, I don't think GoDaddy has done too much, but there's other web providers, or there's outages. How many times haven't we seen like outages as of late? Where it takes down a whole wide array of systems because everybody's using these like cloud computing systems that are completely centralized. So some guy in a data center somewhere, the IT guy, screws up an update or something when they update their system, that the Microsoft was taken down basically, and you couldn't use your Windows on your computer. And so what we're building is basically a place where the like your information could be stored at thousands of places, or just one place at your house if you wanted to. But what it does, it creates like way more reliability, but there's no control over the data. Nobody controls the data whatsoever. That's the cool feature that I think is a massive change from the current platform system, where now all the data could be shared anywhere, basically all at once. And it's kind of a restructuring, like what the guys are telling me that have been in the field for like 50 years of computing and developing. They're saying like, this is quite revolutionary, because what it does, it's a whole new way of communicating and processing information, where you give everything now the power to a local individual person that can now develop. Like, you could like, oh, I need this app, but I would have to probably pay $30,000-$40,000 to make like something that I want. But now with our system, you could have it locally, and you could talk to it, be like, I want this app, and then describe it, and then you have it. And so it could create like a whole new boom of human invention and creation, where it's not stuck under these umbrellas that have full control over you as an individual. And like, we're kind of free. What we're trying to do is just free human innovation and creation to the fullest extent possible, by decentralizing communication and computing completely.
Let me ask you then some of the troubles that you might have.
Yep.
So I'm with you so far, but what happens, like you mentioned, digital ID, and what happens then? Like, how would you avoid that? Where we're seeing it now in Australia, Europe, US, different states to log on. As I understand it for now, it's for certain big tech platforms. So
the platform,
not your ISP. So if you want to use the big tech platforms, Facebook, maybe soon X, YouTube, whatever, Instagram, you're on your internet ISP, you're fine for now. But if you want to go to Instagram, it's like, oh, upload your identification. It's like, if I don't want to, I'm not going to use Instagram, but I'm still using the internet. What happens if we get to a point where governments force your ISP? I mean, in a sense, if people pay with their credit card to their ISP or bank, the ISP already knows, who you are. But if they get to a point where they say you have to you turn on your computer to connect to the internet, you have to use digital ID or something like that. How would you use the OuterrNet without wanting?
No, 100%. Like, that's that's what we're thinking of, or have actually a plan of. It's just like a few $1 million plan to actually build that interconnectedness between devices. Our plan is basically using several wireless frequencies to communicate with each other in like a mesh, type setting. So like there's like something called Meshtastic now, for example, that is text based. You could send text to each other in a mesh. Like it just jumps from device to device until it finds the right person, kind of thing. And that's what we're building. In the background, we have everything set out to what we want, and so now it's just a monetary thing that needs to happen, of course. And so at that point, we could jump in between and around. We were creating our own internet, if you know what I mean. Like with, especially in cities, it would be super easy to set this up because it's close enough proximity that you could just jump around and talk to each other quite easily with having all these devices. And so we're not far away. Like if you have a wireless connection on one of these little devices, you could just basically create a local network. What if you had like this device, and then you can run like let's say in a small community, you could run even a wired connection if you're worried about the wireless stuff. You could run a wired connection, set up a little switch, and have your own little network within a community as well. Your own internet. Like you could store stuff locally on your computers without the need for big tech, and then you basically could have this little. There's like micro internets that we create into a macro internet. So basically, the way we would jump around that was by jumping from device to device outside of the control of the wireless providers and the internet service providers, that they talk directly to each other, the devices, without the need for that actual centralized internet connection. So we definitely thought about that. It's not there as of right now, but we're understanding where the war is coming to. I'm very certain that would most likely be their next attack point, but they got to secure the platforms first, I believe. And then they will actually come after. And when they have full control of the big platforms, which, internet is not that big anymore. It's just like these ginormous platforms that owns everything. And so if you're controlled within that gulag, now there's no way to really leave. But if you get dissidents, they'll try to do the ISP and then ban ISPs from
in Canada right now, they're passing a law. I don't know if they've already passed it, where if they don't like you, they ban you from the internet.
Yeah,
You're as an individual. Yeah. Although I don't know how that would work. For example, if you've got a married couple, and let's say the husband is banned by the government from using from the internet, but let's say the home's ISP is under the wife's name.
Yeah, then bye bye. Yeah,
but how can you? How do you? How can the government? He can still use his wife's internet.
That's a nice loophole, probably.
I'm giving Carney, the consummate Davos man, some ideas there, but
yeah, no, but yeah, we definitely understood what their plan is, and so we fully have that in our plans that we can interjump between devices. What we even want to is we want rogue satellites up in space that we could actually communicate through, because the big problem would be like for you and me to communicate now. If they came down with that control grid, right, they would have full control. We could jump, within cities and out to some rural places, but it would be very hard for me to jump through all that to get down to you in Mexico. And so that's where we really want those satellite uplinks. So I think there's going to be rogue satellites up there that's going to be able to send and then push that information between regions in the world on our planet in the future. So I think what might actually happen is people would be like, well, this is pretty cool. Why are we using this centralized garbage? And then people just jump on. How are they going to stop us? When we get to that certain extent. But they will definitely try to intervene. But the thing is, as soon as you have this little code, this little hub, and the code that it runs on, it's like the blockchain almost. If you send it out to hundreds of thousands of people, how are they going to ban every single, let's say, web address that uses this? It's going to be harder and harder for them the more deployed this gets into the internet itself, because we understand that like we could try to build our new thing, which a lot of people have tried, but then they kind of fail because it's a lot of money building that thing. Why don't we just build it on the current infrastructure and then we understand and we build up capital to then deploy it everywhere. And the cool thing about this is like OuterrNet owns nothing of this. Like that code is open source. You could take that hypernode thing and then deploy it on your computer. And so we can't control you now. You can have it running at home. We can't shut you off. So they could come with a gun to the head of any of us guys and be like, hey, like hundreds of thousands of people are using it. Can't stop it now. Like it's game over.
Well, you mentioned rogue satellite. I think you just triggered the Pentagon AI trawler. But they could take out. They have anti-satellite weaponry. We had Bruce Gagnon. Gagnon recently. They could maybe try taking it down with that. But and what you described, I was looking into Apple tags recently, and that's how Apple tags work.
The mesh,
where they're located through Bluetooth and neighboring iPhones. And
also Jack Dorsey is doing similar things too. So there's not just us, but there's lots of people.
He's doing it with Bitcoin.
No, he's doing it with a Bluetooth texting app that he is developing, like this kind of mesh thing, like with communicate. So he's doing similar things, trying to deploy similar things to what we're doing. We just said like, let's do video on everything instead of just text kind of thing. We're kind of going all in because like today we're so used to using video and big data. That takes a lot of big data. So why just use text? Why can't we just use everything instead? And so I think that they'll definitely try to come after and attack this stuff. I'm not like just living in a rosy utopian world where I think that this is just going to deploy itself and it'll be game over for them. I think they're going to definitely try to pull all the stops and at one point, but you can't just go and ban stuff like that easily. But the more we get it deployed, the harder it becomes to censor this kind of stuff. But we do have those ideas of building those things so they can intercommunicate. But like a mini computer right now that we've deployed here has a Wi-Fi, so we could use Wi-Fi to jump, and it's quite simple to deploy that actually. And so we do have everything in the back of our mind of every single thing that they could do to sabotage and stop us. And so we're just developing within to develop outside of it, kind of thing. That's our approach.
And anything else about OuterrNet? How are you going to gain traction? Going forward. I think you guys are having, or you're looking for early
testers, and users and people that support us, kind of thing. Yeah, like how we're starting it now, we just have like few people that are using it, and they're kind of donating as they're getting the ability to actually use these little apps that we developed, like the video calling, the file sharing, and then we have a few others. Like we have a game that we developed on it just for fun, so people can kind of see how it works. But we're allowing people being able to use these technologies for donating a bit of money, because it's a full-time job developing this stuff, and our head developer needs to be able to develop it to then get it out and to everyone. So that's kind of what we're doing now. We're basically helping him full-time. I have a full-time job, so I'm okay, but he definitely needs his help, because he's actually full-time on this, trying to make the world a better place. And so we created a structure where you kind of donate $30 a month to us, US dollars, and then that allows us to give him enough to survive and eat food and do the basic things, and he could create very, very cool technology that he's developing. Just to give you an understanding of who this guy is, he actually was working on the early BitTorrent network as well back in the day. So he definitely has had his understanding and share of decentralized computing, and he said that it's really bringing back the child in him again. This type of stuff that he's now managed to develop, and so the way you could support OuterrNet right now is just basically donate to us. But we're getting probably within a few months where we're actually going to deploy and share this with everyone that wants. And so he's created a file now that you could download and pretty much put on your computer and open a few ports on your router currently, and then you have your own home hosted thing. And so if people are interested in that too, please contact us, and we'd love to have more of you guys set up these little relays, so the network kind of grows and naturally, and then we can start building this. But yeah, it's we have the open source code, so we'll give that out to people if they want to start their own thing, and then we also want to have people try and use it so we can make it as easy as possible. We want it grandma friendly, because a lot of this tech that has been developed is super cool, decentralized tech that's out there, but it's built for the developer dudes, that understands how to use these things, and it's not like just a easy 1, 2, 3 clicks, to make something happen. You got to understand a bit of code and blah blah blah. What this does is basically just open up a website, click on it, and then it brings up a link, and then you share that link with someone, and that's it. So it needs to be very simple for people to be willing to use it, but that's what you can do right now. And then anybody that wants demos, just please contact John, and we'll do lots of cool demos so you could actually see how this works in real time.
Yeah, I'll the link is in the description it's not on your website, OuterrNet, but it's on the YouTube channel, OuterrNet, in one of the recent videos, and in the description there is the PayPal web.com/donate. That's linked here as well in the description, so if people give $30, then they have access to. Yeah,
and they're kind of like our development team in a certain way, where they just tell us what they like and not, and what if there's some bugs, we fix it, and we work directly with them. So like it's super cool. You get to see kind of the insides of the company, but we're asking, instead of we thinking that we're better than everybody else and can develop something, we're asking people, like, hey, what do you want? And I think that's the right approach, really, because these tech giants thinks that they're gods, that that whatever they create has to be used by us peasants. So we're having a different approach.
Before getting your thoughts on the economy, just before we move away from the tech space, the algorithm ghetto, as I always call it, the digital gulag. Just any other thoughts, advice for people on how to escape as much as possible the digital gulag we are up against? Digital ID, AI surveillance, facial recognition. The big tech platforms on our phones now are just Windows 11 is like, I can't believe. I remember using the early Windows in the early 90s. I think my dad bought a Packard Bell computer, Compaq, and now Windows 11 is like the end game, where they have complete access to all of your data externally, so they can just sift through. They're watching everything. Yeah. And Hakim Anwar said soon you'll only be potentially able to install software only through the Windows 11 App Store, which means if there's some cool software you want, you won't be able to load it on your computer. It's only whatever's filtered through their app store. Yeah. And now
that's why you need the browser,
right? And that's why Google wants to do the same for Google
Play
for
Store,
the Android system, for the Play Store. Apple probably. I was looking at a tablet for the kids, and a lot of the tablets, whether they're the Google tablets or the Apple or Huawei even, and it's all through apps. So I was thinking, you know what? Maybe I just buy like a small laptop computer instead with Linux than getting a stupid tablet, it's like a walled garden. And at least with the Linux, I can just do whatever I want, and the kids can learn on that. So just any other thoughts?
Yeah, that's definitely.
Yeah. And I mean, the idea, the trend of, okay, we should install Linux on our laptops, desktops, get a de-Googled phone. There's Linux phones that people are still working on, getting a dumb phone. Just any thoughts on just general principles of moving away from?
Yeah, no, those are great principles. And it's like, for example, a little mini computer runs on Linux Arch, so it doesn't use Windows. I could run it in Windows. I could start like what's called a Docker thing, which is like a Linux within the Windows. I could do that, but I still are forced to have Windows, for example. But yeah, definitely like the probably the best way to get away from big tech is using open source Linux on your computer, or other OSs that are out there. If you have technological understanding and knowledge to use these things. 100%. It's that's the way you want to go. And then, of course, there is some chat apps out there like Session, and a few others that are like semi-decentralized. Like, for example, I use Element, but we're actually going away. It's exciting days very soon because we're going away completely as a team, communicating through other apps. We're actually having our own communication now on our network, which is super cool. But there are more private chat apps out there like Element that we use currently, which is Matrix, I believe. Signal and Telegram, like they've been shown actually to be kind of controlled, especially Telegram. You know, when Pavel Durov got a gun to his head in France, he let them censor. And of course, like during the war in Donbass, like in Ukraine, certain things was not allowed in certain countries, and so so definitely trying to go off all these things. I would say probably the best path would be to use things like Linux as a software, and it's semi-user friendly now, so it's not like super bad to use anymore. They've gotten a lot better for people. You got to have a little bit of technological understanding, but that's the only real way really to get away from this. And then, of course, like join us and start to using the OuterrNet type system to communicate with people, because if you use it in combination with those guys that have the Google phone and so on, I really should talk to what's his name there. I know who you're talking about this, and really help each other, because I think they're onto something with that. Now, of course, again, there you could control the manufacturer on that side, but until that time, which is going to be quite hard to do, I think there's lots of ways for us to. I think those are the easiest ways to get away from big tech, is using that, and then come over, and soon you'll be able to use the OuterrNet protocol to communicate with your friends. We're creating a group chat that's going to replace completely, the Telegram, and then we already have a video one-to-one, but we found out it's also works as a group video call. We didn't know this until we tried it, and suddenly it works on 5 people talking together, which was kind of cool. And so I would say just work on that and join into projects and support projects like us. People got to understand, it's a monetary thing, unfortunately, for all of us that live on this planet, to be able to feed ourselves. And so we're going to be able to succeed in this. We do need the support, but with that support, we actually want to provide something to you. We just don't want to take your money and have nothing to give you back, because I'm a anarcho-capitalist. I truly believe that I need to provide something of value for you to actually depart some of your hard-earned money. But yeah, I think that's kind of the gist of it. Like it's not too much you could really do now to get off of big tech, but we're really developing hard for you to be able to communicate off big tech right now. So
yeah, and then what you mentioned about tech, again, I had a really good interview with Matt Smith recently on his book, The Preparation.
Matt, yeah,
and how to become a Renaissance man. Again, is that principle? Okay, so there's people of different ages, particularly the older folks who don't know much about tech. Well, it's like, man up, figure out, figure out how to fly a plane, figure out, how to do tech stuff, learn how to sail. It's just that principle again of figure it out and get on it. The economic situation, just your thoughts, where we're at.
Yeah.
I was listening to something the other day. It's related again to the EU. It's like we're nearing collapse. So they are they're bringing in conscription in the EU. They're bringing in the digital gulag so they can do bail-ins. They can control basically take control of all of your assets and money. And they're using the war as a pretext. And they're trying to bring in this new virtual economic system. So we don't have a debt collapse, and so it's like they can print. The debt can go to infinity in the virtual space. Well, what's your just thoughts on where we are with the financial system?
Yeah, we're actually in a quite deep trouble right now. There's a lot of red flags around. Like, I don't know if people have paid attention to Tricolor and I forgot all the names, but there's a lot of like subprime lenders in the auto sector that has gone south. And with that comes nothing better than, of course, the banks and their derivative structures that are leveraged on top of each other in different structures. And to quote, actually, I got the great pleasure, and if people want to listen to this interview, it's amazing, where I interviewed a lady called Alison Pyburn. She was the journalist. She was actually a derivatives journalist during from 2006 to 2009. And so she was actually there while they were collateralizing, but also collapsing. And what she says is you start with the good collateral and then you end up with utter waste and garbage when they build these derivatives. And so they work with the rating agencies again. Magically, these AAA things are collapsing again. Well, like, why? Why we? The thing is, like, yeah, you trust those guys again that they're going to do a job and not get paid under the table to put it. Oh, just give a little bit better rating so we could put it in a pension fund or something like that, right? And so we're seeing a lot of stress with that. And it's not only that stress that we're seeing, we're actually seeing real stress. And I don't know if people have paid attention to what's been going on in the repo market in the United States. With the repo markets are basically markets where banks overnight settle their differences and their balances on their bank account. So if I paid for something and sent it to you, they settle the balances and then they level out at zero. So make sure that they're all like at the same page, so no banks are running low on their reserves or whatever. And so what has been happening as of late is someone is going to the actual central bank to be bailed out, and it started really like last month in October, and it kind of like stalled for a bit. Like everybody was like, "Whoa, there's lots of cockroaches out there." J.P. Morgan, Jamie Dimon comes out, it's like, "Oh, cockroaches everywhere." Suddenly, and it got quiet for a bit, and then suddenly, like, so this repo market overnight, like they actually went to the Federal Reserve. We got to wait 2 years until we get that data to see who actually went and had their hands out. What I know though is that it's only a few banks that have the access to that, and they're called the GSIB banks, the globally systemically important banks, and they're created by the Financial Stability Board, this list. And I have a documentary on my Economic Truth Report that everybody should watch called the Financial Stability Board. To understand what it is, well, guess here in Canada, we got Carney. He used to be the chair of the Financial Stability Board while he was sitting both at Bank of Canada as the head of the central bank in Canada and in England. And so they create a list of approved or systemically important institutions that are globally systemically important. And what I found during the 2019 thing, when I did podcasts with Timothy Picciott, we found out that exactly that list of people were the ones that were getting bailed out. So this is the list. And they just came out 2 days ago with the list for 2025 of their systemically important banks. And there's probably some well-known banks for people, but I'm going to just read it quickly so people understand. Like, these are the banks that will get bailed out by the system because they're deemed systemically. They should have failed because they had terrible lending practices, but they're getting bailed out because that's how the banks control themselves, is having the bailout mechanism for themselves, which is called the central bank. And the list, the GSIB list that just came out, is JP Morgan is number one in the world. They're the most important bank in the world. So they're sitting on their top dog. And underneath in tier 3, you have Bank of America, Citigroup, HSBC, and Industrial and Commercial Bank of China. Then in the second tier, you got Agricultural Bank of China, Barclays, BNP Paribas, China Construction Bank, Goldman Sachs, Credit Agricole, Mitsubishi UFJ, UBS. And then the last tier, you got Bank of Communications, BOCOM in China, Bank of New York Mellon, Deutsche Bank, Group BPCE from France, ING, Mitsu, FG, Morgan Stanley, Royal Bank of Canada's Santander Bank, Societe Generale, Standard Chartered in the UK, State Street, Sumitomo Mitsui, Toronto Dominion here in Canada, and Wells Fargo. So that's the banks that will actually have access to be bailed out. Now, what will happen is that there's overnight repo lending where they've gone and begged for capital from the from the Federal Reserve, and so that kind of intensified into October. And then at the end of the month, it was just a ginormous bailout. And then it kind of fizzled out and disappeared. It's like, oh, everything's fine, great. To like look at the Nvidia is doing great. It's $4.5 trillion market cap. The world is fantastic. And then so what happened after that was kind of calmly like stopped. And then suddenly, right now, at the end of the month, it starts to intensify again. And so somebody's in big trouble. And what we got to understand is when you take an asset, for example, there's a system, and not many people know about this, called the euro-dollar system. If you, in Europe and in lots of other countries, they use the euro-dollar ledger system, and they don't use US dollars or euros or anything. And that's actually banks' own ledgers. What they do is they take one US dollar treasury, let's say a 10-year thing, and then they put it on a balance sheet of a bank. Okay, so that's cool. But what they do is they do something called rehypothecation. So they take that one asset and then they claim it, up to 100, 200 times within that system. And so now everybody's a claim on that one collateral that they have. And then if you have then overnight strain where you have to, where am I supposed to find, I got to settle with someone to make sure my balance sheet is clean. Well, then suddenly what ends up happening is they're panicking. Nobody wants to lend to them. And then they got to go with their hand out to the big banks. So I think it's probably UBS. That's one of the big ones in trouble. But during the last crisis, JP Morgan and everyone was bailed out. Nobody talks about that. Like that was 2019. And so all these banks are interconnected and in trouble together. And then they have all these derivatives. Like there's just an insane amount of them. You got ABS, asset-backed securities, which is basically credit cards, other type of loan, lease loans, like all kinds of different private loans that they have in an asset-backed security. Then you got commercial mortgage-backed securities, which is commercial real estate. Then you got CLOs, which is the ones that are really going to blow up, which is corporate debt. And then they also have the commercial real estate version of CLO, CRA. And then, of course, what is up and being talked about again is CDSs, credit default swaps. And in credit default swaps, it's basically, think about it this way. It very simply explained is like on your house, you usually have an insurance, if it burns down or anything. But in the credit default swap world, 1,000 people can insure your home at once, and they don't even need to own a portion of your home. Like that's the crazy, and that's what brought down AIG in 2008 because they had so many claims, that are insured themselves against the failure of whatever assets, right? And then suddenly, we don't have the money, and then they had to be bailed out by everyone. And so all these bad, mismanaged and capital, like these banksters running around doing bad bets, and they know that they're bad. They know that they're going to get their money back usually. And so what we're seeing now is all the stress in a lot of private credit. And I think we're also starting to trickle over into, there's a lot more talk about like government debt right now with both the United States and massive amounts of debt, Canada. There's tons of European nations that are in a lot of like in a super deep hole, but we're having not everybody's talking about. The private debt bubbles are everywhere in Europe, and this is funny. When you look at, I found out if you look at the highest tax countries in the world, they also have the highest private debt. Well, guess what? Because they can't keep up, their salaries aren't keeping up with inflation. Well, what happens is that they go into debt to keep their living standards up. And so that's why there's massive amounts of high debt levels. And now, for example, in my home country, Norway, I see like every week there's about 2-3 bankruptcies, and people are really starting to struggle. The government keeps on like fighting every day. There's big fights about, government like the Labour Party in Norway saying like, oh, we got to cut, we got to have austerity, we can't afford things. Like even in big Norway with their big oil fund, like Norway where everything is free apparently. I wasn't told about that when I lived in Norway, but apparently that's what they're telling everyone else. So you're seeing distress everywhere, and I think we're at what I call debt saturation levels in a lot of sectors of the economy, where people have borrowed so much money that they can't afford to take on any. Like it's just like game over. And in the debt-based monetary system that we live in, you cannot have deflation, which means that people can't pay their debt. You need constantly more debt to be added. It's like a Ponzi scheme where you have to like shove in more or have people borrow more and more and more because you ever have a higher cost. And when you create the currency on the bank's balance sheets, they create the principal amount, but the interest charge does not exist in the system. So you always have to add more debt to pay off that existing principal. That's why most corporations, well, probably all of them now, don't pay principals down. They don't pay the debt down. They only pay the interest. And so we're like, I think we're nearing the end of Planet Ponzi on that side. I don't know with the governments what they're gonna do. There's a lot of austerity coming to Canada now. I know that, where I'm getting taxed more while everybody else is getting, freebies. So it doesn't really help with for people. And so we're in a lot of distress. There's so many red flags around the whole world and economy, and we're so interconnected. So like this is so in China and a lot of Asian countries too. It's not like we're on this level where like China built so much, like all their Go cities and everything. And now you saw like Evergrande like a few years back, like was a big development with bust there. But that distress is not gone. It's just been papered over by more currency. Like in Japan, they just keep on bailing themselves out by borrowing all the money, and then having the central bank buy the money. But that does not necessarily fix the problem. You're just creating more units, and then suddenly people are going poorer and poorer and poorer because like we get numbers from the economists that says like, oh, it was 4% inflation of the monetary supply. Well, it's like, well, listen, you guys probably created 10% inflation, but my number of 4% is what the businesses and everybody else is going to follow to increase their prices. And everybody's wondering why we're going to end up in this world where you own nothing and be happy. That's exactly that one thing. Is like we have an inflation, the real inflation here, going like this while our salaries are just increasing at a very slower pace. And that's how we end up in the world where we own nothing.
Yeah, and just real quick, as you said, everything's stressed. And Australia, one of my sponsors, our Australian friend, Nick Kraljevic, was on the podcast. Met him this summer. He does the Societatis Civis apps for second citizenship and Pass Vault, which is on the website, geopolitics.com. But he, and then I saw Michael Arbin, who I had on the podcast, who's Senator Babbitt's out there in Australia advisor. Where the Australian government now has this program, so people can't afford to buy houses anymore in Australia, and the government has this help to buy shared equity housing scheme, which is, as you say, you will own nothing, and then Michael Arbin says, can't afford a house, don't worry, you only need 2% deposit plus fees, and the government will chip in and buy a slice with you. Here's the catch: you own part of your home. No, it says they own part of your home, the government, up to 40%. They share in your capital gains. You pay for all the outgoings and improvements. They're now an active player in the property market, bidding against other buyers using taxpayer money. So more demand plus same supply equals higher prices for everyone, and even more people needing help to afford a home, feeding the very crisis they claim to be fixing. So it's absolutely insane. And I forget what
yeah, we're seeing this everywhere. This is like kind of like the UK started it all. Like, oh, guess where Carney was? He was in Canada and he went to the UK to destroy the economy. So like what is happening is that all those programs that you're talking about is just getting it more expensive. It was like affordability. We're going to make it affordable by spending more money on it, but then allowing the price to go up again. It's like it's ridiculous. Like these guys seems to think that they know everything, but know nothing. about how economics work, and like it's like they think that they have reinvented the system where they could circumvent gravity or something like that, like something insane. That's the equivalent of how these
Or
things
it's
are made.
intentional, because at the end of the
No,
day, what's
no,
happening is no one's going to own anything. They're going to own
no.
everything. You see all these different schemes. I saw the latest, was it in the UK or somewhere, a new 15-minute city project, and you would own your house but not the land, or even here in Mexico.
Oh yeah, look at Canada. I don't know if you guys have paid attention to the Covishan tribe. What happened in like it was in BC, where suddenly the land claim got put over to a native tribe, and then suddenly this like guys are like, oh well, my bank is not going to lend to me now. Like they don't want to give me money when I renew my mortgage because the land title is unclear. And I think that's what's going to happen in Canada. Excuse me, that they're going to use the native tribes as pawns to like, oh, here we're going to give you your land back. But then meanwhile, everybody loses their land titles. And so how can you have an economy when there's no private property, which is the basis of free markets, which is the basis of human freedom? And so you take that away, and then suddenly I have a feeling that they're going to be like, oh, just pull the rug under them, because they've done it before, where they just put them in reserves after they colonized them. And so I think they're just going to pull the rug on them again and be like, oh, now we got all the resources and everything that we're going to loot for nothing, which is usually what banksters do. Like Carney is like the hench. What we got to understand, like Carney came from as the chair of the Group 30, which is a think tank, which is the most powerful think tank in banking in the world, because at Group 30, you have the chairs of all the banks sits there, together with the top economists and the heads of central banks. That's who sits there. That's the most powerful entity, and he was the chair of it. And now he's making deals with the government that are enriching his buddies and Brookfield Asset Management at the same time, where he was, one of the main advisors to the hedge fund. And so I think it's just like a looting mechanism. And I do believe you're 100% right, where basically it's all planned kind of demolition, where it's like the Monopoly game. They're going to flip the board and be like, yeah, we have all the assets now. You thought you owned it? Good on you, buddy. We're thinking that you had freedom. And so I think that's what they're going to try to pull on us, where they like now they've indebted most people to the point where they own nothing. And even though if you do have paid off your house, in most places they have a property tax. And so that property tax, if you don't pay it, they take your home, and they raise the property taxes too high. So now, like you see where all of your stuff that you're talking about is coming into fruition, where they just like enslave you into other ways. When you think you got free from them one way, they got you another way. And
I just saw a report quickly in somewhere in the U.S., and they act fast. The local towns and municipalities. Some lady who has dementia, she owned her home. It's paid off, and she forgot to pay, for whatever reason, the property tax. I think it was $14,000. They came in quick and sold off her home.
yeah,
And not even like the remaining equity, because they didn't even care, because the local government and there's criminals that work with this system, corrupt officials, where her $200,000 home, whatever it was, they she didn't pay her tax.
Nothing, yeah.
They took control of it. Then they sold it off to some corrupt buyer who flipped stuff. He paid the $14,000, which went to the local government, and that the $180,000 difference, nothing went back to her. And then this guy now owns this property, and then he sells it for. So he makes it for nothing. He takes her home. So
they basically stole everything from her and then like divided it up between each other. That's like that sounds like something that criminals do.
And there are jurisdictions like where I am in Mexico. My property tax is $100. And yeah, they're slowly increasing everything, but It's much slower than, let's say, somewhere like in the
Oh no, yeah,
U.S. or other countries. In Croatia, we don't have a property tax, so we didn't have a property tax, but now they just added one. Um, so that you do now have a property tax for homes that you don't live in. So if you rent out a home or
yeah,
if you
yeah,
have a second home, but
yeah.
then you can
Bonus
see
yeah.
soon that they're going to be like, for the home that you live in, you will start paying property tax. But that's still way behind like the U.S., where people are paying 5, 10, 15, $20,000 in annual property taxes. If I were to
Yeah,
ask you,
yeah.
if you look at things realistically, not hopium, copium, white pilled, kumbaya um, version that some alt media people have. How do you think they're going to move forward with their project to enslave us all on digital plantations as
Yeah.
neo-feudal serfs in this new neo-feudal world order? There's a specter of war, but it seems, for me, it's more. I'm trying to find it on the quote from Orwell. I keep quote tweeting it when I read some of these latest news when they're talking about EU and NATO going to war with Europe. Here it is. The war is not meant to be won. It's meant to be continuous. Hierarchical society is only possible on the basis of poverty and ignorance. This new version is the past, and no different past can ever have existed. In principle, the war effort is always planned to keep society on the brink of starvation. The war is waged by the ruling group against its own subjects, and its object is not the victory over either Eurasia or East Asia, but to keep the very structure of society intact. So I see all this talk of war that we hear in the United States, in Europe, in Russia, in China.
Yeah.
It's the European class using the pretext of Russia to control the European population. The same for Russia. It's Russia controlling its Russian population. It's the Americans controlling their American population. So just going forward, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think they'll take us to war? And do you think they're going to attempt to lock us all down in our regional digital ghettos or something else?
Well, I think that they're going to have a multitude of approaches. I think the war thing is actually quite starting to ripen because listen to this. 2000. What happened right after the 2000 financial crash? The war on terror. Great one. Well, we could go further back, like to World War One. The banks were in a lot of trouble. They'd lent too much money, and they were like, we need to do something where we could. How could we bail ourselves out? Oh, we go to war because like now suddenly our assets are null and void, and we can kind of reassess and reset the system. And same with World War II. Like what this is like the World War II is kind of. I remember listening to a PhD in economics. He was saying how we need a war in order to be able to fix the problem that we have with a slow growing economy, with too much debt and all this stuff, to the Great Depression and that whole collapse of the banking system. Well, they created war in order to create growth in the economy, and everybody was employed. It's a beautiful time murdering each other where blood is being spilled all over the earth while GDP is going up. It's fantastic. For these calculator punching economists that think that any GDP is good GDP, growth for the monetary system. And so I definitely think that it's very ripe, and especially in Europe, because Europe is in a very deep deflationary crisis. And the crises are driven by population, not growth, but decline. So you see, like in my view, the whole immigration thing that's been going on all over Europe is to cover up, and even in Canada and the US, is to cover up the failing, the population is declining. And you can't have a declining population because that means less loaning out of money from the banking system, which means that the banking system will fail because you need more borrowing. And so that's a huge thing, huge portion of it. And when you combine that with you import all these people and you still can't get more growth, what do? You are starting to see like failures everywhere over Europe, like the amount of collapse in business and you see, like I look at the economic numbers for Europe, the business sentiment, everything is down, and now it's starting to deflate. the economies are going into deflation, which they cannot have in the monetary system. In the banksters cannot have deflation. And so it really, really worries me. A war or false flag of some sort that they're really trying to put up some feelers, what they could do. And I do think it's a great way of like having these the evil entity of Russia, fighting back against, Europe, which is Western values. And you kind of play the peasants up against each other while, really need to reset the economy because the banksters are losing their money. And so I think I'm very, very worried about that, to be honest with you. That's why you see we got to put in Ukraine with Article 5. Like we got to really get Ukraine into Europe and NATO so we could get this war started because our economies are starting to fail. We can't let this go on because if our economies are failing, our peasants are angry, they might revolt and topple our governments. And so I think that's one of my biggest worries, actually, Rovi, is the war drums that are really starting to beat. And you see that in the United States, against using Venezuela as a pawn. Of course, I don't like the government there at all. But I think that's another pawn to be used. And you've seen that with the economic failures as of late in 2000, 2008. 2019, we didn't have a war, but we did have, they called it a war, against the virus. And so you see, I think they're going to just pull something off again because we're heading into deep economic decline right now, where the system has saturated itself again. And I do think that they're going to try to do whatever they can to keep the system afloat, keep that, the whole structure going of their government control system. So I think you're going to see potentially during this reset, and you're seeing it very close where we have the digital currencies really starting to be pushed hard. They're struggling in Canada because Canada is low tech, so they're really having a hard time with Canada, getting people aboard on that. But in Europe, especially, it's quite high tech, in Europe. So I think Europe might see the demise under the digital euro that is very close to. Lagarde just came out and said that they're very close to the last step now. But what's better than a crisis and a war to implement digital ID and control? Look at what they're doing with all these pesky immigrants that we let in. Now we need digital ID to control and make sure that we don't let this pesky they create the crisis to then come up with the solution. They're very smart. They're coming up from the right side, which is anti-immigrant sentiment, to be we need digital ID because we don't want immigrants now. So they're having a faceted approach. And then we recently had a rebel against UN here in my province, where they tried to create what was called the Winnipeg Metro region. Whenever you hear the Metro region, that's a UN term. And so they tried to create all the municipalities around the city and then combine them into one. And I remember reading the document, and the head of this lady of a policy group called Winnipeg 2050 came on radio and said that, this is nothing. These conspiracy theorists that are talking about 50-minute cities are so wrong. We have nothing to do with that. And I actually used AI to run their policy document and then have it, look at this policy document and then look at the 50-minute city policies and then see if there's direct wording from it. And they found paragraphs that are direct wording from 50-minute cities.
This is crazy. Yeah. So I just searched this real quick. If people type in Winnipeg 2050, you get it's a clear agenda 2030, smart, resilient, 15. It's a center plan 2050, and it's always a copy paste, the same graphics with people on bikes in their little 15-minute cities, and the key phrases they say greening downtown, reimagining, resilient. It's the same garbage. And I think I remember you telling me this. I don't know if it was on a TNT show or whatnot, but this is insane. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's right there in your face. And I remember, this was funny. I said it on the radio show. I was I text in. I'm the pain in the ass for the local people when I drive. I like to just be a pain for them and ask them hard questions. And then they got this question. It's we're going to connect you with local news, media, video media, because I was on the radio. And they're going to interview you about this. And then suddenly there was a meeting about this that was supposed to happen, and there was 1,200 people showed up to the meeting, and then they said, "Oh, we can't. The government says that we can only have 100 people in this building, so we're gonna have to cancel the meeting." And then nothing was talked about ever about Winnipeg 2050 again. So it kind of just like fizzled out for a bit. So, but they're still there. They're probably reimagining how can we approach it next time to like take their and then get it implemented, because they're trying desperately. These guys, like, they're working as hard as the most successful people in the world that are building real businesses. They're working almost the same amount of hard to actually implement our enslavement. And so, like, we're up again. We can't slack back here and think that we're like, oh, now we're fine. Like we got rid of these guys. Like, look at the United States with the anti-UN sentiment, but then as soon as the other guys got in, the UN is back again. And so these guys will work relentlessly to enslave us, and we got to work relentlessly to free ourselves. I think that's just the message that people need to hear is like, you can't slack back. Like, unfortunately, like, we got to be out there and give good ideas versus the bad ideas of centralization and control. We got to give good ideas of individual freedom and liberty. I think that's the only message that we need. If there's something that we could tell people to do, is like, do never let yourself, like, relax and rest as much as you can, have a good life, but understand that they work really, really, really hard to take all your life away from.
I was going to ask you for a final thought, but I think we can't get any better than what you just said, where we have to work relentlessly to free ourselves.
Yeah,
that is the key principle in all walks, in your home, in your neighborhood, with starting with yourself, and then with the city, with the nation, with these globalists, and that principle you just apply everywhere else. So, and referring to war earlier, I was going to say it does feel like 1938, 39, where they're using Ukraine, that situation, as the pawn to trigger a third world war. And again, we all understand that the players, it's all convoluted, but that doesn't mean that they won't start a real shooting war. And millions, hundreds of millions could die. That's why they're preparing the European cannon fodder and elsewhere to go and die for this reset, effectively. There's no way I would fight in any of these wars, because you understand it's for the satanic bankers and their reset in the Fabian socialist mold, to remold the world nearer to their heart's desire, as is the glass stained window they have out there. And
and you're seeing this, like, this is the actual worry of mine. Like, I see my old home country of Norway. It used to be quite libertarian, but then all the libertarians moved to the United States during the 60s, 20s to 60s. And then what is interesting now, 7% of the votes go to the actual Communist Party in Norway. So that should wake people up. And I was in the military in Norway for a year, because it's forced service in Norway, like forced cannon fodder service. So you train to, be obedient and everything. And I was up on the Russian-Norwegian border, of all things. So I got to see the spy satellites. I actually did the intelligence, where we got the intelligence reports from the border and be like, oh, they're building a radar dome over there. Could you send the U.S. spy satellite? We basically were an outpost of the Americans, but nobody really said it. But it's pretty obvious, because Norwegians do not have spy satellites, and it was the Americans that just sent whatever we requested over. And I think they really are pushing, because I follow quite closely what's happening up north in Norway, on the close to the Russian border. They deployed like 3 new battalions up there. So they're really like wanting this war, and as I said, it's very ripe for it, because the economic sentiment is not good for the bankers and for the people in control. So, like, they definitely need something to reset and try to get our minds away from wanting freedom again, and then trying to have us fight each other, murder each other instead, which they've been very powerful at. for the last centuries. They've been very, very good. Well, probably for all of humankind, but there's always the people that love their lives and how we were created on this earth and want to just be free human beings and live their life to the fullest. And I think we still want to try to do that to our very, very best that we can, and then find each other and just help the world and tell the world about what beautiful life can be if you're a free human being and not have these slave drivers that constantly push us around.
Yeah, and as you said, people are going to wake up whether they like it or not, as was the case with COVID and what is coming. All of your links are in the description. So again, if people want to be beta testers for the OuterrNet, their link is there, so they can sign up on the PayPal, $30 a month. Your website, theeconomictruth.org. Any other best place to find you?
Well, no, I would say theeconomictruth.org is where you find me. Anything that I do, you find links to it there. So all my social media and everything. I do post, if I can mention, I do post a lot to Telegram. So search up the Economic Truth Report on Telegram. You'll find lots of stuff every day. I try to post 2 or 3, 4, or 5 articles there to share with people that I think it's important. So yeah, that's it.
All right. Stay free. Thank you, John.